Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to grecochess, the YouTube channel of chess. I'm your host, Karelas Oniziris, and in this video, we are going to present the game I gave at the fourth round of the QCC Winter Swiss Tournament. What exactly is that? It's hosted by the Queen's Chess Club at the basement of a church in Floral Park, New York. And before we show the game, let's share the information about the tournament. It is 5SS, meaning 5 rounds with the Swiss system. G69, excuse me, G90, D5, meaning that when the players start, they have 90 minutes on their clocks, 1.5 hours. And when it is your time to move for the first 5 seconds, the clock does not move, and then it continues going downwards, and you must complete all your moves before the clock shows 0. It's taking place in 5 consecutive Fridays. And we're going to show here the 5 rounds. Once we can highlight, why can't we highlight this? Here we are. The first round took place on February 20th and I lost. The next 2 rounds took place on February 27th and March 6th and I won. And now I'm going to show to you the game from round 4. Friday the 13th, would that going to be my lucky or my unlucky day? But before we even enter the game, who is my opponent? My opponent is Flora Yam. You see here, her rating is 1410. It's shown here, 1410. And compare this with my rating. My rating is 1656. I'm 246 points above her, which would mean that I'm the favorite, but you know that many surprises have happened. They've both defeated players with 2000 and lost from players with less than 600. But Flora had the white pieces, I had the black. Let's go to the board to see what exactly is happening. And I believe if you've seen the previous videos, you know how this works. On my hand, I have the score sheet. I'm going to enter the moves one by one. And the computer will give you a numerical evaluation. Positive number means white is doing better, that is Flora. Negative number means that black is doing better, meaning myself. It's going to make a comment on the move. The first two moves are book moves, meaning theory, chess opening theory. Then you're going to see anything from 2 exclamation marks, that is brilliant, 1 exclamation mark, that means great. A star means that it is the best. Of course, a best that is neither brilliant nor great. 1 exclamation point means it's excellent. I'm sorry. Uh, 1 exclamation point we said before, it is great. After the star, the next one is the thumbs up, that is excellent. After that is a check mark, it's good. And on the negative sides, if you see question mark following the exclamation point, it's inaccuracy. 1 question mark is a mistake, and 2 exclamation marks is a blunder. Also, computer will say which move would have been the best, and what are the 5 top options for the other player whose turn is to come. And Flora starts with the so-called English opening. C pawn goes to c4. It's one of the book moves, of course, the theory, as you see here. The most popular one is pawn to e4 or pawn to d4. Next one is the English opening, as you see here. It's the pawn going to c4. It has a mildly surprising effect. Of course, you control the square d5. And since it's not so common as the other two, you might be able to surprise your opponents. Other first moves is the red T with knight to f3, or if you prepare the fianchetto with pawn to g3. And there are some other ones that are even less popular and slightly inferior, like pawn goes to b3, or knight goes to c3, or pawn to d3, or pawn to e3. So I have to face the English opening, and the most popular replies is pawn goes to c5 or pawn goes to e5. The symmetric or the e5 to control the center even better. And I reply with a pawn to e5. You see here it is the number one choice of the computer, but the differences are extremely small. Move number 2 for Flora. The top move of the computer. See here, pawn to g3. The reason for that is because you prepare the bishop to go to g2 and control the long diagonal that goes from h1 to a8. No surprise there, this is usually the case. Now it changes the name, it is English Opening King's English variation. And since Flora wants to control this diagonal, I try to block it with my pawn going to c6. Another book move, maybe not the best, but when I see bishop ready to go to g2, I try to block it. Bishop actually goes to g2, no surprise there. Another book move, and now I block the diagonal even more with my pawn going to d5. And now after the first three moves, Flora's seeing that maybe this long diagonal is out of her control, she's trying to take control of the other diagonal from a1 to h8, and the first step is move the pawn to b3. Computer doesn't like it too much, just thinks it's good. And I develop my knight. My knight goes to f6. In the meantime, while analyzing later, I was told by a friend that there was a chance to take the pawn, and if the pawn takes back, my queen goes to d4 and threatens the rook. But in any case, the computer does not even think about this move. It's not in the top 5. I wonder what would happen. I'm going to do a little experiment. I'm going to take the pawn and see what the computer thinks about that. And then I'm going to cancel to delete this move. Computer doesn't like it at all because bishop goes to b2. You sacrifice your pawn, but you have control of the long diagonal for white. I'm going to delete it, just put it as an experiment. Unfortunately, I didn't play it because it is too tempting to win a pawn from the beginning. My knight went to f6, developing the knight, and Flora now sends the pawn to d3. We're now out of theory, as you see. Even the move b2 to b3 isn't good. It's not in theory any longer. We left the opening theory. We are going to continue with the English opening, King's English variation. And next move for Flora is pawn goes to d3. Another move that is good, but not the best. And now I'm going to take the pawn, and I'm going to explain why I took the pawn. In fact, I'd like you to pause the video and see why did I take the pawn. Give yourselves a few seconds, a few minutes if you want, because these exercises are very beneficial. And if you come back, or if you found the solution already, the reason I took the pawn is because Flora has two choices. Choice one is assuming she doesn't want to lose the pawn, is take it with the pawn and then weak change queens, and Flora cannot castle any longer. In fact, this is the top choice of the computer. Well, of course, without queens, castling right is not that important. The kings are not so much in immediate danger, but if you can deprive your opponent of castling of any other option, why not? But that's not what Flora played. Flora played the move that is not in the top 5 of the computer. The pawn went from b3 to c4. And before I play it, and you see what the computer thinks about that move, not the computer. The computer was going to give the 5 top options for me, for the black player. I want you to imagine the pawn has gone to c4, from b3 to c4 like this. And what would I play? If you're black, what would you play if the b3 pawn took c4? And by the way, generally, there's a saying, if you can have more than one ways to recapture a pawn, better recapture towards the center. Especially if you have two pawns that can recapture towards the center. But every rule has the exceptions, and this is one of the biggest exceptions. And if you found it, if you tried it, if you come back, let's see what's going to happen. But before we go to move number 6 for white, we finish the first 5 moves and computer says I'm ahead by 0.91. Not bad. But still, this is not that big of an advantage. It would become even bigger after the pawn from b3 goes to c4 instead of the d3. And you see here the computer sees a mistake. Not only that, you'll see here, I wish I could hide the screen. What I played is a top move of the computer that's far better than any other else. Queen goes to d4. And I think it is clear why this is the top move for black. It's a great move for the computer. Well, during the game, not always easy to find this great move because it comes out of nowhere. And when I saw this possibility, I just couldn't believe my eyes. What's happening is the queen is threatening the rook on a1, and white cannot stop it. Flora took more than 10 minutes thinking how to reply. And finally, she went with damage control, meaning yes, you're going to lose, but minimize it. And she played the fourth best move of the computer. Computer wants to give away the rook and forget about this side and continue developing on the king side. But Flora decided instead of a rook, minimize the damage and lose only a knight. Knight goes to c3 after more than 10 minutes of thought. He knight crashes the computer, but really this minimizes damage. So instead of a rook, uh, I'm going to take only the knight, and once the bishop, computer would prefer if my bishop went to b4 and pinning the knight and exerting more pressure. Because then I'm also threatening the rook. It's becoming even more dangerous. But I saw the knight, grab it now, without too much thought. I get it. A good move, but not the best. c3, and Flora places her bishop on d2. You see, now I cannot take the rook on a1 because it's protected by the queen on d1. So I grab my knight and I'm going to continue the game with an extra knight. But can I win the game? That is a big question, because there have been games where I was down one and sometimes even two pieces and they won in the end. Also games that I was ahead by a piece and I ended up losing. So the fact that I got an extra piece so early doesn't mean too much. I have to be extremely careful, and the first thing I need to pay attention is my queen is in danger. If I do nothing, bishop grabs my queen, and no good winning the knight when I lose my queen. So queen goes to d4. Queen near the center. Knight f3 and attacks my queen. Again, my queen has to go somewhere, and the question is where. My first instinct was send the queen back to d8, be as safe as possible. But in that case, knight grabs the pawn on e5. Save the pawn. Because if I start losing one pawn after that, the other 3 pawns I lose, and they're equivalent to one piece. So queen goes to d6. Protects the pawn and is safe. Flora castles. And continue developing. Bishop goes to e7. Flora places her bishop on c3. Finally, her bishop grabs the long diagonal that goes from a1 to h8, although the price of a knight. And also my pawn on e5 is in danger. It's attacked twice by the bishop here, and the knight defended only once by the queen, meaning if I do nothing, bishop takes pawn and threatens my queen, and my queen will have to start running right and left, and who knows if it's going to be safe. That's why I avoid any possibility, but we finished 10 moves once again. I'm ahead by 3.03. My advantage becomes now quite important, although all I need is one moment of inattention and I can lose the game. Bishop to c3, and I have to defend the pawn on e5. How? The only move I could see, knight goes from b8 to d7. But Flora wants that pawn, queen goes to c2, and later move will go to b2 to win it. How can I save it? There is only one way. If queen goes to d6, so later on bishop can go while Flora places her queen on b2, my bishop goes to d6. But then knight may go to g5 and my queen will be chased right and left, and I was afraid I would be in danger. And that's why I decided forget about the pawn. I'm ahead by a piece, and yes, don't like losing the pawn, but I don't want to have my queen chased right and left, blocked by the knight. If this knight goes here, where can the queen go? I think the only safe square is f5, then the pawn can go to e4 and chase the queen, and before I know what's happening, my queen might be lost, may have nowhere to go. That's why forget about it. Let's continue development. Castle. And computer thinks it is the best. And of course, Flora is going to grab the pawn on e5. No surprise there, I knew it. Inaccuracy is a computer. I'm sorry, mistake. Copied the wrong move from the score sheet. I jumped one move. First, Flora places her queen on b2 because now the pawn is attacked 3 times. By the knight, by the bishop, and by the queen. It's defended only twice. By the knight, by the queen. And there's no way to defend it. If the queen was not here, the bishop would go there. Well, there is a way to defend it, at least on the short term. If knight goes to g4, it's defended, but then the pawn goes to h3, and the knight has to leave, and then it's not really defended. So what I decided to forget about the pawn, and my rook is going to go to e8. And now Flora takes the pawn. I'm sorry before that. Before that, in fact, it would be a big mistake on her behalf if she did it. Knight takes to e5. And my bishop goes to f8. The best is a computer. The bishop goes to f8. Why? Because now the knight is attacked 3 times. Knight, excuse me, rook, knight, and queen. And it's defended twice only by the bishop and by the queen. So if Flora does nothing, I'm winning the knight. But of course, Flora will do something. Out of the many choices, she places her pawn to d4. And there is a nice catch. I don't like the knight on e5, but if I try to grab it, pawn goes here, and it pins my queen and rook. I can take it with my rook, perhaps this pawn, but then bishop takes my rook, attacks my queen, attacks the knight, and the situation is that I lost an exchange for a pawn, meaning eventually material-wise I lost a second pawn. I already sacrificed one, so I'm not going to do it. What I did is I placed my queen to e6. So if next move I grab the pawn, there is no pin any longer. We finished 15 moves. What is the score? I'm leading by 3.12. And this is just because of Flora's mistake on move number 6. I'm keeping the same difference, neither increasing nor decreasing. Let's see if I can keep it. Pawn to e3 for Flora. That can see that now I can start taking the knight and want to defend as much as possible. And I win the knight. Of course, Laura will take back, but now there is no pin any longer. Now I can safely take my knight back to d7, and I'm attacking the pawn on e5. Computer does not have my knight go to g4, maybe, but there isn't the thinking is the same. Attacks the pawn on e5. It's attacked 3 times by knight, queen, and rook. Defended twice by bishop and queen. Now Flora can defend it. Who defend if she wanted by pawn to f4. I was thinking really, in fact, during the game, I was thinking, what if my knight, instead of going to d7, went to g4? Now the move of pawn to f4 would not work because I would win the pawn on e3. But then Flora would do the following. My knight goes here. So Flora, instead of pushing the pawn to f4, will place the bishop on h3. And my knight is pinned, and next move, maybe the pawn can go to e4. Of course, perhaps queen could go to g6, but I didn't want to. In any case, it wouldn't be easy to grab the pawn. In any case, I didn't want to enter such scenario. That's why I played what I thought was the safest. Knight to d7, the second most popular move after knight to g4. But I felt it safer. I avoid having my knight being pinned. But Flora does not protect the pawn, sends the queen to e2, which gives my knight in aggressive computer the chance to take on e5, bishop takes, queen takes, and they got back my pawn. You see here, both sides have 6 pawns. Both sides have a queen, both sides have 2 rooks, but I have 2 bishops and Flora has only 1. Flora sees that the rook is attacked, although it's defended at this time by the other rook, so sends it to c1. To make sure the pawn is also that the pawn has more protection on c4 and the rook will not be attacked if the other rook moves. And I send my bishop to a3 to attack the rook. We finished 20 moves. What is the score? I'm leading by 4.12. It's significant, but once again, all I need is 1 moment of inattention. Game is lost. Rook goes to d1. Flora says here rook. And my bishop goes to f5. So I develop my light-colored bishop. And also my rook on a8 is free to go all the way until at least d8. Rook goes to d4 for Flora. And here I have the chance to win the rook, because if queen takes it and pawn takes back, then rook wins queen. Unfortunately, I didn't see it during the game. Instead, I exerted more pressure on the rook by sending my bishop to c5. In aggressive the computer. Of course, I missed a great chance. I think most likely it's a miss. Rook goes down to d2. I'm still ahead, but I miss a chance for a huge advantage. Rook goes to d8. Exchange rooks. I'm ahead. Why not? Flora says no. Rook goes to b2. And at this point, I take advantage of a steward, and my bishop goes to d3. You see what's happening. Flora's queen is attacked. If she takes with the queen, she loses the queen from my rook. If she moves the queen anywhere else, I win at least and exchange the rook here. Flora decides to send her queen to g4 because anywhere else it's in danger. If she sends to d2, for example, I take the rook and let's do it again. Here. Why doesn't the arrow move? Yes, then not only I take the rook, but Flora cannot take it back because the queen is in danger. C2, of course, is lost. Anywhere else, really, it is in big danger. So decided to do what I thought she would do. Send the queen to g4. The reason being, at least let's attack what we can. excellence as a computer, maybe not the best. The computer thinks the best is sacrifice the queen, imagine. And this point I realized, yes, I can win the exchange, but why not win the entire rook on b2? We finished 25 moves. What is the score? I'm leading by 6.77. Now, really things are so much better because I'm ahead by not only a light piece, a bishop, but also a rook. My material advantage has already reached plus 8 material advantage and 677 in the computer valuation. Flora sends her rook to d1, at least not lose even more material. And my bishop goes to e2. You see there's a double attack. I'm attacking both the rook on d1 and the rook on g4. Meaning if Flora moves one of these two pieces, she's going to lose the other. And she takes my rook on d8. And believe it or not, it's never too late to blunder. Let's go back. And if you didn't see the screen before, I'm going to ask you if Flora takes the rook and I take the queen, what is going to happen next? You see that? Okay. Imagine, try to imagine yourselves. I'm not showing it. So imagine the chessboard, or you can do it in a real chessboard if it's better for you. What would happen if I took the rook on d8, excuse me, if Flora took the rook on d8, from d1 goes to d8, and from e2, I would win Flora's queen on g4. What is the next move for Flora? That's what I mean by saying what would happen. And if you came back, just to tell you, the answer is simple. Flora from d8 would win my rook on e8, and she would win the game by checkmate, back rank. That is why it's never, never too late to blunder and lose a game. But instead of that, Flora took my rook on the last attempt of a swindle. Computer sees a mistake, but I don't think so. I mean, you're desperate. Why not try for a swindle? And my queen goes to c1. And at this moment, Flora resigned. Why did she resign? Not too many options. If she places the bishop on f1, there are only two legal moves. Then queen goes to f1 and checkmate. If she places the rook on d1, the other legal option, bishop goes to f1 and my queen will take the bishop and it's checkmate. So by avoiding the temptation to win the queen, instead of blundering at the very last moment, that would have been one of the biggest mistakes of my career life, I win the game. And after this win, I have 3 points out of 4. And believe it or not, in the overall points, I'm second in the tournament. Of course, I'm equalized. I'm tying for second place. Jay Bonnings ahead with 3.5 out of 4. And I'm second with 3 points, tying with other 3 players. Which means that if I win the last round, I have a chance to win the tournament. But this is dream for next week. In the meantime, first of all, Flora, she played a tenacious game, really. She used almost all of her time. When the game ended, she had less than 4 minutes. So for 27 moves, she used 86 minutes, more than 3 minutes per move. She was really trying her very best in a very difficult situation. And about her mistake in move number 6, uh, well, this can happen to anyone. I've made mistakes like that and no reason to criticize or make any bad comments. Flora is a very tenacious player. She has played very well in other games. Just happened to be unlucky in the game that she played against me. I happened to be the lucky person. And let's give a look at the review. What does the computer think about the game? %76.8% for Flora, 91.4% for me. And I don't see why the computer does not give a rating for each of us. Maybe too brief. Usually there's always a rating coming with that. Uh, I had one great move, the move when I sent my queen to d4 and threatened the rook. Three book moves each of us, best 13 versus 8 for me, excellent. 9 versus 6 for me, good. 5 versus 1 for Flora. Flora had 3 inaccuracies, 1 mistake, and 1 blunder. And it seems I had no inaccuracies, no mistakes, no misses, no blunders. I only had one good move and all the others were at least excellent. Let's do the start review. I don't think there's a reason to go back to that. Okay. This is the game. We saw before the evaluation. The computer says it forces an event. Checkmate. This concludes yesterday night's game against Flora Yam that I really have to tell everybody I was lucky. But also not only I was lucky, when the lucky moment arrived, I was able to exploit. When in a previous game, even though I won in the end, I had the chance to win the rook in the previous round, and I missed it because I was too eager to get a pawn. And of course, I was careful not to grab the queen in the end when I would have lost a game. What lies ahead? Let's look at the tournaments. Tournament directory. The next one I'm organizing is the grecochess. We have already 10 players having registered. Once we reach 64, the game will start. And if you are interested, why not register for that? It's going to be a wonderful idea. Open, all ratings are invited. It's going to be a very exciting tournament, although I expect it will take some time until it begins. And let's go to the other ones I'm following. It is the annual of chess.com with 55,000 participants, the chess.com Daily Chess Championship. We're advanced to to round number 2 already, and how many games remain? 9 games remain to be over, and all of them have reached at least move number 62, between 62 and 101. Let's see when will they finish. And the next one, organized by Zanilor, my Tyler subscriber. The Moonlight Underwater. That has already reached the semi-final, the third round, with 12 players remaining. And we already know the 6 finalists. So the first group, officially, it's done. Mebius from Nigeria, Steam Rocket from Australia, and Chinanfu from Greenland have already advanced the final. They're from the second group, although a couple of games remaining. Uh, Nothing can change. PG74 from Italy, Maxim Govoroka from the Ukraine, and AMMT from Indonesia have advanced. But once the 2 games complete in Group 2, we'll have the final. But that's it for now. What else? Tomorrow, Sunday, March 15th, the Chess Sandy tournament, the quads, where I'm going to face 3 opponents of similar ratings. Next Friday, the 5th and last round of Queen Chess Club. See if I can make it to the top. I have a small chance to win that tournament, or at least equalize for first. Let's see if this is going to happen. But of course, I'm expecting a very, very strong opponent. We'll continue, of course, facing the bots. Let's give a look at the bots. Which pot will be facing? Play? What? We are already at the advance. We've defeated both beginner and intermediate. In the advance, it is a turn of Lorenzo from Italy with a rating of 1800. We start the 1800 bots. Let's see how well can we do against them. Until now, we've not always been so smooth. Now we need to share the screen. Where is the share button? So you can also see Lorenzo from Italy with a rating of 1800 and is telling us ciao, which is the Italian greeting. I've always wanted to be a king. Let's see, Lorenzo, what can you do? And if we can eliminate Ciao, then it's time for Wally from Scotland and Julia from the Netherlands, all three of them with ratings of 1800. But, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching. Thanks to the viewers, the subscribers, the likes, and the comments. As I had mentioned before, if you are fluent in Greek and would rather feel more comfortable in Greek than in English, please tell us so we'll make more videos in Greek. This is Karilas and Isiris, Greco Chess channel. Goodbye.